Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all well. Hasn't it been an absolutely incredible 2 or 3 days? So here we go. We had almost the entire media started off by the Daily Mail in a campaign against reform, which backfired on a grand scale today when Nigel Farage went live and actually produced evidence of what was said by Boris Johnson 8 years ago. Now, is it that he forgot what he said? Did he think that it just wouldn't be found? Or was he just happy to just be able to just grab the headlines this morning and beyond that, he was just hoping for the best? I've noticed that for many people, this was the final straw in their respect for Bojo because he really, really has shown himself to be even lower than we had all anticipated, anticipated than we'd all seen from his behaviour. It's incredible that just 5 years ago, uh, he was handed a massive majority and he effectively had the future of this country in his hands. Things could have been so different, but ultimately, deep down, he showed himself to be a dishonest, treacherous, and incompetent leader. He did start off as a Remainer, and even at the time, I believed that he had jumped onto the Leave campaign simply to get himself into the limelight, which is all he cares about. He wasn't concerned about getting Brexit done. All he wanted to do was to just get himself some glory. And along the way, he sold out this country, sold out Northern Ireland, sold out to the globalists, sold out to the pandemic. The list just goes on and on and on. What started off about what may or may not have been a few lies about a glass of bubbly and a slice of cake has turned out to be the unearthing of one of the most dishonest prime ministers this country's ever had the misfortune to be in power. And as a result of that, the knock on effect is the complete collapse of the Conservative vote. More than likely, next week we will have Keir Starmer in power, and by his side will be Angela Rayner. Mhm. The woman who had to apologise for using foul language to describe the Conservatives, the woman who made up foreign policy while she was in a room full of men who support a terrorist organisation on the far side of the world, and without any consideration for the implication of her reckless words. And that will not just come back to bite the Labour Party, it will come back to bite the entire country, because the mere suggestion of capitulating to terrorism will have implications in other areas where there are conflicts, border disputes, occupation, potential invasion. All sorts of damage will have been done by her ridiculous words. There's a reason that we have a Foreign Office, and there's a reason that it is customary that ministers consult with the Foreign Office before they express any opinion about foreign policy, because the Foreign Office has people who know everything about geopolitics to advise them on what position to take, what to say, and more importantly, what not to say. And not only did she go hurtling in, but rather than try and limit the damage, she obviously bullied Captain Flip Flop, who then followed in her footsteps. And he has laid the foundations for some serious problems going forward. And unfortunately, it could affect all of us as well. So that is not very good. The Chadcos, how's it going? Yes, very well. I'm absolutely delighted today this has been probably one of the best days that we have had at Reform today, because so many people have been in touch, and they're over the moon that what began as a hate campaign by the Conservative Party and the Daily Mail has basically backfired on them, uh, to a degree that is it's impossible to actually even describe, because the public have seen straight through them. But what is interesting is, over the last week or two, especially since they released their manifesto, is the amount of Labour supporters who are also moving over to Reform, because no matter how much they are desperate for some sort of socialist government, the true colours of Labour are beginning to show through. In their manifesto, they have left out the best part, the major parts of what they intend to spend. And hand in hand with that is, if they're going to spend figures that are not in their manifesto, then they need to raise money that is not in their manifesto. And no matter how they have tried to spin it, they have only ruled out increases in three taxes. We know that there is going to be a raid on people's equity, on people's income, on many different aspects of life. This is going to be a very, very painful administration, very damaging, one founded on contempt for success, one founded on hate for independent schools, policies of resentment, Marxist policies which are not levelling up, they are levelling down. It's not equality, it is pushing everybody down to the lowest common denominator, unless it is on their terms, which is quite tragic, really. Let's just go to the comments. Can't wait to vote Reform. I'm sick to the back teeth of the main parties. I just want change. That 20k tax-free allowance would help out so much. Yes, it would, and that's exactly what it is designed to do. It's going to lift millions of people out of income tax. It is actually disgraceful that people who are below what is considered to be a living wage, which is £20,000 a year, pays tax. It is disgraceful that an increasing number of pensioners are paying tax thanks to fiscal drag. When the higher rate when the high rate was at 40% to begin with, or rather when it was lowered to 40% back in 1988, it only basically affected about 1 million to 1.5 million people, and that within 2 or 3 years is going to affect 7 or 8 million people at the current rate. It is absolutely horrendous, and it won't actually cost as much as has been allowed for. I believe it will actually cost far less, because there are factors that haven't been considered, and that is that everyday people are the start of the financial food chain. When these people have money for essentials, living on 20,000 or less, that extra money is money that people will need to live on. So effectively, for those who are on a lower income, that money is not going to suddenly just be going into the bank somewhere or an investment. It more than likely it will be spent on necessities that they currently maybe do without. That will have a big boost for the economy. We then need to take into account the cost of inland revenue time chasing up these people for the tax that they pay, which is not a significant amount collectively anyway. So again, it requires strong government to actually take that opportunity to reduce unnecessary civil servants. There are thousands and thousands of unnecessary civil servants. That, of course, will be the hard part, because there will be pushback. They don't like being reduced, especially all of those who are quite comfortable sat at home with their mouse jiggler pretending to be working whilst they're walking backwards and forwards to the fridge. That needs to change. We need to be far more productive. But today has been a significant turning point. We have had quite a few. From where we started a few weeks ago, the progress has been absolutely incredible. From where we were before the election was called, we were, of course, expecting to have perhaps a 6-month run until the next election, which would have been crucial to us, being new, having a much smaller budget, especially the individual candidates like myself who are paying everything out of our own pocket. We don't have the millions that the Labour Party has to spend. And obviously, the Conservatives thought they would have more to spend than they did, but they've run out. Despite that, on social media, we are so far ahead of them, it is untrue. And the irony is, about a month or so ago, the Conservatives decided that they were going to up their spending on social media, marketing, digital marketing, sponsored ads, etc., in an order to fight back against the reform. And then last week they ran out of money and had to bring everything to a halt, which is a shame. Let's go back to the comments. What we got here? What do you think about the ban for taxi drivers to have an English flag on their cabs? I'm furious about it. Absolutely furious. But we know the mindset. We know what's going on. And what bothers me even more than that is the mentality behind it, because I would not only allow them to, it should almost be compulsory to show support for our team, for our flag, for our country. But then we quite possibly could have somebody like Emily Thornberry in government very, very soon, who absolutely hates our flag. In fact, the entire incoming administration, should it go that way, do not actually have any respect for our country, for our flag, for our heritage, for our institutions. Here in Northampton, and I did say I was going to go get out and about, make a few videos to show you what I mean, and I will try and do it this week. I just don't seem to manage to make the time. Nearly everything that is bad about Northampton is a legacy of previous Labour governments. Years ago, Northampton was a beautiful, mainly Victorian town, just a small Victorian town with lots of beautiful buildings and dozens and dozens of beautiful Victorian shoe factories. And it was Labour administrations in the 70s that pulled those down, many of these buildings, and replaced them with the ugliest buildings you could possibly imagine. If they had attempted to create buildings that were uglier than the ones they created, they wouldn't have been able to do it. I don't think it was possible. We had, I think it was actually officially the ugliest building in the country, which was Greyfriars bus station, which thankfully was blown to the ground 8 years ago, and they've only just started to build on it, and who knows what they will build there. But anyway, many of our beautiful buildings were pulled down by these cultural Marxists who literally seem to have issues with heritage. I don't believe that any of these buildings should ever be pulled down. They are priceless. They cannot be replaced. But like culture, like heritage, once they are destroyed, they are gone forever. So unfortunately, the damage left behind by these people, even though they have effectively, in the order of things over the last 100 or 200 years, have only had a fraction of time in power, and they've always failed. They've always destroyed the economy. And keep in mind, in their entire history, only 3 Labour leaders have ever won an election. Only 3. And there's a reason that we have a spell of Labour and then people literally kick them out And then traditionally, we've then had a conservative government who steps in and fixes the finances and saves and so on. And just as they begin to balance the books, then a younger generation, curiosity, quest for change, we end up with Labour again. This time there was something different because from David Cameron in 2010, we never had a Conservative Party anymore. We just had a treacherous globalist, and everyone who's followed in his steps has been the same. These two parties have both morphed into infernal servants of the globalists. They do not care about this country. They do not care about the people of this country, the culture, the safety of its citizens, the safety of its women and children. They do not care about anything at all, and they both need to be kicked out. Just take a look now. In London, sorry. Yeah, well, I can understand that. It's terrible what's happened to London. The media is no friend of reform. They will build you up and then try and knock you down. They haven't built us up. All they've done is attack us or ignore us, to be perfectly honest. I was very fortunate to be actually invited to a debate hosted by BBC News last week, which was unexpected. I didn't really expect them to do that. You've seen what's happened on mainstream media, how Nigel was left out. Obviously, they knew that if he were present, he would have ripped them to shreds. But having said that, it doesn't make any difference, because the more they have tried to attack us, the more they have actually drawn people towards us. People are not stupid. They have seen through the media's behaviour. Everything from a BBC presenter referring to Nigel Farage as using his customary inflammatory language, if you remember that, and she had to apologise with her towel between her legs. Then there's her arrogant brother who works for Channel 4, another person who hides under the banner of positive discrimination, and actually behind the scenes is a seething hater of anything cultural. But it was actually wonderful to see her have to apologise. But ultimately, everything they've tried on reform or Nigel Farage has backfired. But today was absolutely wonderful because it really has blown up in their faces. Let's have a look now. Can we book a cab and hold it out the window? Wow. Yeah, well, apparently they're imposing large fines. Um, even even the fact that the number of London cabs has been eroded so dramatically is yet another symptom of the damage to our culture. Not sure how many there are now. There used to be, I believe, 22 or 24,000 London cabs, and I think at least a third of them have gone, if not more. And ultimately, that is not just a symbol of London, but it was also a symbol of safety, because the minute you got into a London cab and closed the door, told the driver where you want to go, you were safe and you would get home the quickest and cheapest way, and barring any very, very rare exceptions, you would get home safely. But then we need to look at Uber, the people behind them, and as always, follow the money. But it's tragic that we're losing so many cabs, and it's tragic that there is such a massive war being waged on our heritage. TikTok is controlled by CCB. They have access to all your contacts. Yeah, I know, I understand. Unfortunately, here's the difficult thing, because you can't really win. Because when you are on YouTube or Facebook, then they control the algorithm, and if they don't want you to be seen, nobody sees you. I've had the same video, exactly the same video, just cropped and put on TikTok, And on TikTok, there's been videos that have had thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of views, although most of those ones then get taken down. A lot have been taken down in the last few months. I think I've had about 15 taken down. And I know I've not said anything that is worthy of them being taken down. And that's far more than on YouTube. But if you persist, then YouTube is definitely better than TikTok. And yes, I agree that I would prefer, and I have been thinking, to just go live as I am now and stick to YouTube and Facebook, because ultimately we know what China is doing, and I'm actually surprised that uh, our governments over the last two or three decades have allowed this country to become a major superpower, because they've created or contributed towards their enemy becoming stronger, and I don't understand why. So Nigel Farage, he's great, absolutely great, and they are petrified, because no matter what happens at this election, even if we get just a foothold into Parliament, a foothold of the people, the calibre of people who we have, including Nigel and many others, is enough to terrify them all, because they are all guilty of hiding the truth from the British public. If you've watched the pathetic debates on TV and the embarrassing squabbles between Angela Rayner and Penny Mordaunt, which quite frankly were embarrassing, but they were just a charade. Neither one of them will stand up and actually tell the British public or admit that they are spending 30 billion a year on net zero, and most of it goes to subsidies which are given to friends of those who are connected, who are making a fortune blighting our countryside. If you take a look just at the foundations for a wind turbine, we're talking thousands of cubic meters of concrete and steel that will just be left buried in the landscape when that wind turbine finally uh, finally stops being used, because without subsidies they're not actually viable. And but what concerns me most is the amount of farmland that we are losing thousands and thousands of acres. We have one just north of Northampton, um, solar farm on the way, 3.7 square miles of it. That's bigger than Gibraltar. I did look up how many acres there is in 3.7 miles. It's thousands of acres. And then I tried to research how many people that amount of acres would feed, and it is thousands of people. And there are hundreds of these up and down the country. Yet our food production is less than 50% of what we need. And effectively, we need to reach 75% of our needs in order to be fairly safe from starvation. God forbid there's a conflict, and yet we only produce 50% and falling, because the population is growing and our food production, land for food production, is shrinking. Why would they do that? Why? Right, let's have a look. Right, sorry, who we got here? I sense Cabby protest coming on, and Andy the Gabby, yeah, he's a great guy, isn't he? Northampton, well, thank you for replying to my comment. Robin, uh, I hope I haven't missed a comment anywhere, because there was somebody today who said I'd missed a comment. It was in a group. I just hadn't seen it. But I am replying to things all day. There are days when I want to get out, and I have so many emails come in from people locally and so many questionnaires come in from my website, and I do make a point of replying to anything. So if I've missed anyone, it would be simply because I just haven't seen it. I've missed it. And no way I would ignore anything. Reform, just like Trump, always playing the victim. Okay, that's your opinion. That's fine. Yeah, same comments removed without. Same, my comments removed without warning. I don't know when that's happened. Uh, Donald, I know your cousin Michael. Uh, Mona, just a Mona, cheeky me. Okay. Anyway, so on top of this, I have had a few trolls on my pages over the last week or two. Um, One of them was actually a Facebook friend for quite a few years, and suddenly he just uh, he just turned and he was commenting everywhere, putting terrible comments. So in the end, sadly, yesterday I had to take the decision to literally just block him everywhere, which was tragic because I'm quite happy to hear everybody's opinion. But you find there's a certain type of person who won't respond. They'll just be horrid to you. And it is a certain type of mindset, which is a shame because when people do disagree, I've even offered to people to join me on a live stream where they can express their opinion. But it's funny how so many of these people won't do that. You find that the most offensive of comments come from people who actually don't really want to reveal who they are, or they just won't do anything unless they're at the safety of their keyboard wherever they may be, and that's fine. That's up to them. That goes with the territory. It doesn't even bother me, to be perfectly honest. All I'm concerned about is that people like that don't waste my time and prevent me from responding to genuine supporters, of which there is an incredible amount, and hence the reason that we have created such a wave. And I'm actually enjoying how much some of these people are threatened, and they should be, because we're talking about people who are on the verge of electing a party who has nothing other than contempt for this country. And if you've been keeping up with the rejoin nonsense, you'll be aware that the EU it has now said that we can't pick and choose, and that if Starmer wants to renegotiate any form of Brexit deal, it would have to include free movement. And that would just be the start of it, because the mere suggestion that he would be prepared to concede terms would give them the opportunity then to impose more and more conditions to get exactly what they want. Because, like it or not, since we have left, and even though we haven't left properly, Europe has begun to sink badly, politically, financially, and socially. As we saw in the last election, there was this stark move to the right throughout Europe. And what really terrified them is that a great number of those who moved to the right were young people. And just here, like here in the UK, there is an incredible number of young people who are reform supporters. Indeed, when I was on BBC News last Thursday, before we had our meeting, there was a few students who were going to be interviewed before we started our debate. And by sheer coincidence, I recognized one of them. He had been to one of my meetings. And I came home and went straight to listen to what was said. And effectively, the reporter, I knew where where she was going. And then when she got to ask them who they were going to vote for, it was clear what she thought she was going to hear. And the first one said, "I'm voting reform." And she asked the second one, and he said, "I'm voting reform." And then the third one, and then she didn't ask anymore because it went completely the wrong way. This is what is actually happening behind the scenes, which is really encouraging. And it's such a privilege to be representing these people, because we're all realistic about how far we can go from a standing start. Um, and obviously, we are limited on our resources. There's no way that I could have got round every house in Northampton the way that the Labour Party has. They've been campaigning with a team and with massive funding for 18 months. I started a few weeks ago. There's no comparison, but it doesn't make any difference. There's still a huge amount of people who have had enough and are reform supporters, and indeed I have had lots and lots of images and little videos of supporters who've been completing their postal votes, and they've been sending me photos of them ticking the box with reform or my name or whichever. And then Alex, I'm going to vote for Reform UK. Good choice, Alex. I'm voting for the first time to vote Reform. I'm 23. I'm so delighted to hear that. Was with pro-Palestine march on Saturday in Abington Avenue. Do you know, Anthony? Yes, I know Abington Avenue very, very well. In fact, I went to school not far from there. I went to school at Stimpson Avenue. So I used to walk up to the top of Stimpson Avenue, onto Abington Avenue, along Abington Avenue, past the church. On the right, there was a shoe factory there. There were shoe factories everywhere. They used to fascinate me. I've got to go. Keep up the good work. Bye-bye, Pizza Mad. You should join the Reform Youth Movement. Bye, Pizza Mad. Free Nelson. So, anyway, now, every day I'm hosting Meet Your Candidate. Most days between 12 and 2, I'm at the Bradlaugh for a couple of hours for anybody to meet. Sometimes quite a few people come, sometimes one or two only, depends. I do have a public meeting planned, or I did have one scheduled at the Bradlaugh for Sunday. I'd arranged them weeks ago. I totally forgot about the football. So the last one was last Sunday, a week yesterday. It was at 6 o'clock, right in the middle of two football matches. Even so, a fair few people came. But this Sunday, I'm thinking to actually change it to the Wednesday evening, the 3rd, because there's no football on the 3rd or the 4th. And that will be the night before the election. So it will be lovely and very, very exciting. I'm still trying to work out where I'm going to host this, because the Bradlaugh has an event on Wednesday evening, so it won't be able to be there. But I'll post updates on my Facebook page. And free Great Britain, free Nelson Mandela. Okay. Anyway, so if you would like to attend a meeting, just keep it on my Facebook page. If you want to help promote reform in your area and you want some leaflets or some posters, please feel free to get in touch with me and I will try and get some to you. I am building up a team. There's quite a few people been out posting leaflets, so we are covering more and more of the town, and there should be a Royal Mail drop for the whole town any time in the next day or two, I believe. So that hopefully will at least give us a presence in every house in the constituency. And obviously I will have at least one more public meeting. I'm still deciding where that's going to be, and I will let you know. If you have any questions in particular, or if there's a specific topic that concerns you and you would like to arrange to meet me in person, feel free to get in touch. You can message me on here on my Facebook page, via my website. If you do have lots of suggestions, I do have an election poll on my website with 10 questions. I have had hundreds and hundreds of these completed forms, which has taken up a lot of my time, but it's been actually priceless feedback from the people in Northampton North. Although looking at them, the theme that concerns people most, the issues that concern people most, seem to be quite similar. They might fall in a different order slightly, but generally they seem to be the same issues. People are concerned about housing, cost of living, concerned about the number of people coming to this country, concerned about safety, security, concerned about things that were mentioned in the comments earlier. Here we are in London, in England, and the Mayor of London bans cabs from flying St George's flag, which is an absolute outrage. That's just one example of many, and yet people have been, if you like, brainwashed into a corner where they feel that they can't stand up and object to this horrid behaviour. And of course, they are assisted by a treacherous underworld of people who have nothing but contempt for this country, or indeed throughout Europe. It's the same pattern, but people are rebelling. People are beginning to rise up against this. And just as in this country, people en masse have been moving over to reform. Things will change. This is definitely a revolt, and the people are joining the revolt en masse. Let's just have a look at the next questions. We need a big event before election. I would love that. I really, really would. And to be honest, we're Yep, I'm going to answer that as well. We are being made to shame to be. I absolutely agree. I would love a big event. I've been thinking to have one somewhere public, as in it's summer, which is unusual because our elections are always in the winter. Who knows if this ever happens again? So we could have an event in a public place. So I've been thinking of a few places, but I don't know how that would how that would stack up with the Northants Police. So I would have to check with them. Uh, if we had more time, then I would have definitely arranged a super event, perhaps in the large room at the Deco or something like that. That would have been wonderful, and even arrange for guest speakers to join me, or at the very least, Ben Habib. He's a great, great speaker, Ben Habib is. But it's always frustrating if you speak after Ben Habib because he covers so much territory. Then where I've gone to speak after Ben, I've thought, well, he's covered this part and he's covered that part. So if I'm going to discuss this, I need to think of something different. So you have to think on your feet. But Ben is absolutely incredible. They all are absolutely incredible. They know their stuff and they stand there. They don't need a script. He doesn't. Anne Widdecombe doesn't. Richard Tice doesn't. And obviously Nigel Farage never needs a script. And he always knows what to say. And it's absolutely incredible. And it's been a privilege speaking alongside them. Haven't spoken alongside Nigel, but I have. Last Friday, I was in Lutterworth at a meeting speaking just before Anne Widdecombe. And it's the second or third time I've been at the same meeting as Anne. And she's absolutely incredible. And Ben Habib a few times. And last month, a meeting in Rutland with the candidate there, Chris Klaus and Richard Tice. Again, very, very good candidates. Many of our candidates are absolutely incredible. They're so dedicated and they are everyday people. They're not career politicians. They're people who've put their life on hold, whatever it is that they were doing. They've put their hand in their pocket and they are standing up for this country. And we need to stand up for this country because this agenda of shaming our flag, shaming our country, our heritage, everything about it is an absolute disgrace. And perhaps it's time we also began to look more closely at why and who is behind this and what their reasons really are. Many times it's a case of follow the money, but not always, because some of these people have other reasons. In the case of many of these people who may unfortunately take the tiller, it is little more than resentment and contempt for our society. Uh, as I said, we could be facing a prime minister who, not that long ago, was singing the praises of Jeremy Corbyn and still cannot answer a straight question. And it was actually embarrassing when he was live on TV and he was being asked about his support for Jeremy Corbyn. And all he could do was just reply, I didn't think we were going to win. Did you support Jeremy Corbyn? I didn't think we were going to win. Why did you support Jeremy Corbyn? I didn't think we were going to win. This is somebody who wants the mandate to be in control of this country, and he can't even answer a single simple question. He doesn't know what a woman is. It was humiliating on an international scale when he was on the record on TV saying to mainstream media that a woman can have a penis. What kind of twisted, weird person is he? I really, really don't know. But apparently it's fine because Uncle Blair has had a word with him. He made him face the wall for half an hour and do some lines. And apparently now he's changed his story and he claims to know what a woman is. Does anybody really believe him? Because I don't. Right, comments. Not me. Great grandma 71 and still won't conform with woke. Here, here. We are being outbred. They are breeding. Yes, well, we need to take this very, very seriously because, as Nigel has said, if not the election in 5 years, and actually I don't think it will be 5 years, I don't think, if the worst should happen and Labour get into power, I don't think that they will last very long because the makeup of the party and opposition will be as such that Labour is literally going to face a civil war between the Corbynites and the Blairites, and ultimately, no matter what he says, no matter how he tries to spin it, Starmer is not middle of the road. Starmer is a Marxist. He hates this country. He hates the establishment. He's on the record saying that he prefers Davos to Westminster. He's so incompetent that he will eagerly hand over as much control as he possibly can to the EU. And the EU is a failing project. No matter how you try to spin it, it is a failing project. In 1970, in its current size, including the UK, for statistics, the EU would have represented 35% of global trade. By 2022, it was down to 18%. 22%. By last year, it was down, without the UK, to below 15%. And by the end of this decade, on its current trajectory, the EU will represent less than 10% of global trade. It is becoming increasingly irrelevant. The German motor manufacturing industry is in serious trouble. They produce less than half the cars that they did a decade ago. We're seeing Schengen fall apart as the individual nations begin to patrol their borders because of the problems of mass immigration, social upheaval, political upheaval. It is on borrowed time. And every country in Europe is suffering the same as we are. It's just that they're in the middle of it, in the clutches of the infernal EU. Their heritage and their culture under threat, under attack. And collectively, throughout Europe, we should all stand against this because every country in Europe has its own beautiful heritage and culture, and everyone is so unique and so different. But the heritage of all the European countries is hundreds of years of evolution and development to reach where they are, but they can be destroyed so quickly, and they must be protected. We must protect our heritage. Right. Proper living wage needed so couples can afford children. Absolutely. But I've covered this before. It's not just enough to be able to earn more. People need homes, and the housing crisis is not just down to mass immigration, which of course has exacerbated the problem with millions more people here than there was a decade ago, but there are several factors. All of them could and should be addressed, but they haven't been addressed. Firstly, there is capacity on brownfield sites for 2 million homes not being built. In England alone, there are over 670,000 empty homes, long term, unoccupied, derelict, unfit for purpose, etc. Your major developers would have no interest in renovating these homes. The margins are not big enough and it's time consuming. You can't throw them up like you can do a Legoland house on the edge of town in a suburb. It is people like you and I who would renovate these homes, and the one reward that we would have for doing so was the £12,500 per year capital gains tax allowance that we could make profit without paying tax. Firstly, there was the attack by George Osborne, who added a 3% stamp duty surcharge to properties that weren't designated as your primary home, which it's a significant amount, 3%. Secondly, there was the capital gains tax allowance that the fiscal drag queen, Jeremy Hunt, basically eroded down to nothing. No incentive whatsoever to encourage an army of working people to renovate these properties, which is so sad because British people love property, they love renovating property, and whether these properties are renovated to be sold or to be rented, it would be another home brought back into use. And it doesn't matter if they are, as they say, in the wrong place, because if these properties are in the wrong place where there is not so much demand, for example, the Northwest, then any government with any proper structure and any proper social and commercial strategy would simply bring in incentives for business to move to these locations. And when businesses move there, personnel move there, the properties are renovated and occupied, urban regeneration happens spontaneously. Over the last decade, planning for 1.1 million homes has not been built on. 30% of land with planning never gets built on, and it's nearly double that in London. If you haven't joined up the dots, I'll do that for you. The major developers, along with one or two other companies who I won't mention by name, buy up this land. It's called land banking, and basically cling onto this land and drip feed the property as and when it suits them so that they can make you pay more and keep the cost of houses out of reach of everyday people. They have managed to deny an entire generation the right to own a home or rent one should they wish. Now, this lot who are coming in, all of you over 60s who actually have the bulk of wealth in your hands because you've worked your lifetime and you have acquired more wealth one way or another, they're after you. Now, in 2019, and this was under Boris, the Wealth Tax Commission looked at what it can raise with a one-off wealth tax. And it starts off with people who are worth over 10 million and it ends with people worth over a million, which could be just a terraced house in London. When this lot run out of money, I believe that figure could come down significantly. One way or another, they are desperate to plunder people's equity, and that goes against my grain. This culture of envy and culture of resentment is wrong, but at the same time, we must not pull the ladder up on young people. We must ensure that they have access to a home so that they can have a family, because that is the fundamental bonding of our society. How are they supposed to have a family if they can't even rent, let alone buy a home? Also, even though I do support overseas investment, it should not be permitted for overseas investors to simply park their ill-gotten gains in our property market and then just leave them empty. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of homes throughout the country, mainly in London, sat there empty. One of the most beautiful streets in London, the Bishop's Avenue, bought by Middle Eastern investors back in the 80s. Most of the properties there have sat there empty and they are literally falling to pieces. If foreign investors are going to invest in the UK, then the government should have laws and incentives to encourage them to invest into building social housing, affordable housing, starter homes on brownfield sites. There is no need to be constantly building outwards on our farmland. We need that for our food. There is enough capacity to build homes. The point is, these are very, very simple steps to take. So, if they're possible, if they could be done, then why has nobody done them? Is it possibly because everybody who gets in the pockets of the developers? The same way that they may well be in the pockets of people who benefit from plastics, because they're all so keen to tax you under the guise of this net zero nonsense, and anybody who disagrees is a climate denier. Which one of them has actually stood up and said, which is this is fact, that the greatest threat to our ecosystem and to us currently are microplastics? Our ocean is littered with them. Our fish, it's in the food chain, it's in people, it's causing ill health, it's causing sterility, and it could be dealt with tomorrow. No more plastic bottles from tomorrow. Every public building to have a water fountain, every market square, every shopping mall, every airport, every train station. Why are we filling our planet with plastic bottles? None of them will address that. They want you to change your car to reduce your emissions by 0.0000 whatever it may be, because we are one of the cleanest countries in the world on one of the cleanest continents. And meanwhile, China is building hundreds and hundreds of coal-fired power stations and literally choking the entire planet. Why don't they twist China's arms by literally imposing taxes on China's goods? No, because people like Jeremy Hunt have connections and they don't really care about the climate. They don't care about anything. They really, really don't. I don't know. Is it because they are inherently evil? Are they psychopaths? Are they demented, delusional? I'm not really sure. I'd have to spend some time speaking to them to work out which one of those it is. But I assure you, sure as eggs are eggs, it must be one of those, because not one of them actually addresses the real issues that are killing us and killing our planet. And yet they'll use this net zero nonsense to make your energy so expensive that you have to think twice before you even turn your heating on. That's not right. I thought his dad was, he made a tool maker. All right, my dad was not a tool maker. No, might as well confess that. But he did own a fish and chip shop. So, sometimes the cultural analogies are true. Okay, small, tool maker, waste man. His mum was called. Okay. Sell derelict homes, £1 for people. I agree. Anything. Get these houses renovated. Encourage people to be able to buy these properties. It can be done. And the sad thing is, it doesn't need to cost the government a single penny. Obviously, I know about this. It's my business. I know how many people there are out there looking for investments, as in properties. There are so many people. And if there were the opportunity, the incentives, the tax breaks, then the properties would be built at no expense to the government. On the contrary, think of the revenue generated from all the materials being bought to build these houses, all of the income on the salaries of the people building these houses, all of the money generated in VAT for the contents for these houses. The multiplier factor is absolutely incredible, and yet they really, really don't care. And as far as I'm concerned, as we get older, we have a burden of responsibility to young people to ensure they have a home, to ensure that they are able to have access to an education that will benefit them. Now, if somebody at a later stage in their life can afford to go and study cotton wool and they want to do it because they have an interest in it, of course, education is beautiful at any time in your life. But for young people, surely the focus should be on what education will benefit them. And we need to end all of this all of this positive discrimination, because I assure you, there are many people who are being dragged into and handheld through universities to make up the diversity figures, and they do not have the capacity to be there. And yet the university is under pressure to spoon feed them through university, even though they are not up to it, to pass them. And then when they go and apply for a job, then I'm afraid they get it, not you. And we know why. That must stop. We need to look after our young people. They're suffering from climate anxiety because they have been convinced by these nutters that the world's going to end tomorrow. And just you wait until Ed Miliband gets into office. Now, here is a horrible little man with a huge inferiority complex and a grudge because you, the British nation, voted the wrong way and you didn't vote for him. He obsessively supported Sadiq Khan and his exploitation of people in London under the guise that the fumes from their car are killing millions of babies. However, if you can afford to pay, you can pollute as much as you like, but that doesn't kill anyone. But let's not mention that. He is going to, as Minister for Climate and Energy Environment, whatever his role is going to be, he is going to impose some punitive taxes on people. And one of the first things that I believe that he will do is to move the green levies from electricity to gas, to make electricity a little bit cheaper and to make gas significantly more expensive, so that it costs you so much more to keep warm using your horrible gas boiler. So you rip it out and then you put a heat pump that costs thousands of pounds and your house will be lukewarm. Because when people come around to sell you one of these contraptions, they don't actually tell you that before you install one of these things, first thing you should do is insulate your property to the max, which can cost thousands. Bigger radiators and underfloor heating, because the flow temperature of a heat pump is much lower than a gas boiler. And therefore, with a gas boiler, if you have one radiator to one side of your your room, your lounge, for example, that is blisteringly hot, your whole lounge will get warm. But if that radiator never gets above lukewarm, the other side of your lounge will never get warm. They don't tell you these things until after you've installed it, after your neighbour has complained to the council because it kicks in the middle of the night and it upsets them. And then you find that you, on top of the thousands you've paid for this thing, you have to then pay thousands for additional insulation and radiators and underfloor heating. As I've said before in a video I've made about it on my property channel, if your house is insulated well enough for a heat pump, you don't really need one. All you need is 2 or 3 tea lights. It's an exaggeration, I know, but gives you something to think about. Let me just check the questions. If there's anything else. Philip Green stole my wealth off me, my private pension. Yeah, well, if you've noticed, over the last 2 years since this guy's been Chancellor, no mention of anything to help housing, no mention of anything to help mortgage payers, no mention of anything at all apart from encouraging more people to plough their money into the stock market, into pension funds, this sort of thing. First of all, our stock market is one of the worst performing in the world, effectively. It's not that long ago that our FTSE All Share Index was worth no more than it was 20 years previously. It's not like the S&P 500, but then you need to look at the types of companies that make up the FTSE All Share Index and compare it to the S&P 500, which has Facebook, Google, Apple. What do we have? Tobacco, uh, you know, 18th century goods.com, antiquated companies that are still effectively running on the momentum of the last century. No innovation, no investment in technology, no investment in new technology, which is so very needed so much. And then we wonder why our stock market is not growing. But I would put it to you, that the stock market is almost the original cryptocurrency, because you put your money each month, whatever it may be, your contribution into your pension, which is basically uh, uh, unit trusts or collection of shares spread evenly depending on which fund you put your money in. And you have these spoilt brats in the city who day trade with your money and make the company billions. But when it goes wrong and they lose billion, they plunder your pension to recover their losses. It is obscene. And if we really, really did have a true and just judicial system, most of these people, probably including the Chancellor, would be in prison. It's absolutely disgraceful, and it's happened again and again and again. And the latest trick will be to plunder people's savings because they got away with it. First time was in the noughties in Italy. It was a 0.5% savings tax that they imposed, the one-off 0.5% on everybody's savings in their account. They got away with it. Then in 2013, following the Deutsche Bank devaluing a lot of bonds that were loans to Greece, once they had sold them off, they then devalued them. So all of the banks who had bought these bonds lost billions. That actually then not only damaged a lot of other economies. One of the main victims was Cyprus. I know this, obviously connection. And what happened then? They then imposed a haircut on two banks, and they took every single penny over 100,000 euros from people's savings account, and they got away with it. Well, that's the second time. Then we had COVID and they locked everybody down and even instructed people to inform the authorities if their neighbour was not obeying lockdown rules, and they got away with it. Is there anybody out there who's foolish enough to think that they're not going to try something like this again? Well, I believe that they will. And I believe that it could be this lot who are coming in. I don't know. Let's see what happens, because there is a massive hole in their budget and they are literally keeping their lips tight. They are playing such a terrible game of deceit throughout this election, hiding what they genuinely plan to do. But we will find out, sadly, within weeks, if within months, if not weeks, rather, after they get in, if they do, what they really intend to do to the British public. And I fear for the people who they will plunder, because I don't believe that anybody's personal wealth should be plundered. There are other honourable ways to generate income. We have Amazon literally driving retail out of business throughout the country. They have clever accountants. They can keep what they pay to a minimum. And VAT is a final buyer's tax. All the way through, businesses reclaim the VAT, so it doesn't cost them anything. It's only the end consumer who pays VAT, which doesn't really get anything from Amazon. I believe that online companies, large ones like Amazon and Facebook and Google, if they make transactions in the UK, they should pay sales tax on those transactions at the point of the sale, no exception. If their sales are £10, then 5 or 10% of that, there should be 5 or 10% on top of that sales tax that is collected at source. If they sell in the UK, they pay in the UK. And done properly, then perhaps it could balance out the advantage they have over our high street shops, which have disappeared and are basically destroying our way of life. I don't know about you. I'm sick to death of having to buy clothes online. I absolutely can't stand the fact that I can't find something in Northampton because there's no shops left and I have to order things online. And when it comes, it is not as I thought. The fabric is rubbish. The fit is no good. And in many cases now, you're charged if you want to return it, even though it's not as described. I want to see our high streets revived again with smaller shops, with no business rates, lower overheads, so everyday people can return to retail. And if we have an abundance of small character retail shops, the people will then flock to town, provided that local authorities are prohibited from exploiting the motorist. That is where it needs to start from. And with regards to ULEZ in London as an example, what were we told when he announced he was going to be expanding beyond the M25, which was his first expansion? And if you remember, when he expanded to the not M25, when he expanded to the North Circular and South Circular, he said he was disappointed with the revenue that it generated. Think about that for a moment. People have to pay ULEZ because they have an older car. If they could afford a newer car, they would have a newer car. So this person was unhappy that he was not able to extort more money from those who actually can't afford to pay it, which is why he then decided to extend to the M25. And what did this impotent government, outgoing government, do? They passed the buck and said, oh, there was nothing they could do about it. I believe that they were quite happy for him to take the flak for the ULEZ charge to generate money for Transport for London, because the more he generated via extortion of the public, the less the government would have to contribute towards it. So, because through this campaign, there's even been a hint at then reversing the expansion to the M25. Well, if they could do it now, or if they could do it, should the British public be naive enough to vote them back in, which they won't, then why didn't they do it then? Why did they allow it? Rumours of a third lockdown are circulating. Well, as you are all aware, the WHO would like us to sign up to give them permission to enforce their pandemics as and when it suits them, and be able to take, 20% off our medical supplies anytime they like. I'm I'm against all of these globalist organisations. I'm against the WEF and their globalism. I'm against the WHO and their pandemics. I'm against the United Nations and their global compact on continued and sustained migration, which Theresa May signed 2 days before the 2019 election. I'm against the EU and their pan-European Marxism, and I am against the ECHR and their half-trained, half-wit, arrogant pseudo-judges who think that they have the right to impose their will politically, and they interfere and overrule our judicial system. And I've heard it all before from the people who literally really need to stop watching the BBC. So I'll give you an example. Most of the countries in and around Europe are obviously in the ECHR. One of those countries actually is recognised by the British government as not respecting human rights. And hundreds of thousands of people from that country within Europe, or on the edge of Europe, have been granted asylum in this country. Even its own citizens who use it as a guise to get indefinite leave to remain here. And the funny thing is when they do get their ILR and get their passport, guess what the first thing they do is go back there for a holiday, but that's another matter. And yet Canada, the USA, Australia and New Zealand, they're not in the ECHR. Are you telling me that those countries don't respect human rights, or respect human rights less than one or two of the rogue nations in Europe? I'll leave it to you to work out which one it is. I say not. We have had the Magna Carta. It was Britain who actually gave the world human rights, but it has been, the ECHR has been hijacked. It is being used politically to tie us up in knots so that we cannot get rid of people who are in this country openly stating that they're here to destroy this country, and we can't remove them. No, no, no. Out from all of them. And anybody who comes here as a visitor, as a student, as a migrant, or asylum, if they break the law within 5 or 10 years of coming to this country, then they go. No questions asked, no questions at all, no delays. And the only way we can do that is to leave this. And for those of you who just say, you know, we will then be like Belarus and Russia. As I said, stop watching the BBC, because we know who you're going to vote for. We know how you think. There's no point wasting my time even talking to you, because I might as well be banging my head against a brick wall. Personally, I want out of all of them to save our country. We don't need them interfering in our politics, interfering in our judicial system, issuing lockdowns and pandemics, and imposing their will to overrun our country and our citizens, to destroy everything that has taken hundreds and hundreds of years to build in this country, because that's what they're doing. And for those of you who don't like it, guess what? Tough. Standing charge on gas, electric is a tax, really. Yes, it is. I've long argued that. And it hits the lowest users the most. I'll give you an example. When it first struck home how unfair it is, about 10 years ago, I was renovating a house in Rushden. And as soon as I got it habitable, I moved in while I was continued renovating it. And in between, I was spending quite a lot of time away. Now, this had it had a prepay meter on it. Fine, it was okay. At that time, it was slightly more, but it didn't really make much of a difference. But what I noticed is, all through the summer, didn't have the heating on, and sometimes I would be away for, 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And when I sort of looked at the dates of when I topped it up, effectively in a 3-week period, I had put £30 in it, for example, and had a shower each day, and that was it. So effectively, the rest was just going on a standing charge, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. Then I found a company that you could get a prepaid meter without a standing charge, but the unit cost per gas was slightly more, but it was still worth it for me. It took a long time before I managed to get to move over to this company. And a month after I moved over to them, I think they were called Ebico. They were bought by Scottish Power, and that was the end of the no standing charge, I believe. I think there was Ebico and perhaps one more, and they've been bought up, and there is no supply of gas without a standing charge, which is absolutely outrageous. Be perfectly honest, that is like your local chip shops charging you a standing charge, for it to be available for you to buy a bag of chips. And as always, it is the poorest who get hit the hardest, because if you live in a massive house and you use £4,000 worth of gas in a year, then the standing charge of £200 or whatever it is irrelevant as a percentage of your total. But if you're somebody who has to decide between heat and eat, that standing charge makes a big difference, and it's unfair, it's unethical, it's immoral, and none of them will do anything about it, and I disagree with it. Anyway, that's all for now. I've ranted on long enough. I'll be back soon. I'll see you next time, and I will post updates to my next meeting. If in the meantime, if you have any questions for me, please feel free to get in touch, as always, because there's nothing I love more than to hear from people, especially if you're in the Northampton area. I don't mind even if you disagree with me. You're fine. If you want to meet up so you can heckle me, I've decided to stand for this seat, so I have to take what comes with it, good or bad. Bye bye for now and see you next time.